The storm wasn't just rain, it was a furious wall of water, slamming against the windshield of the massive Kenworth truck, as if it wanted to break through the glass itself. Roger, a 55-year-old long-haul trucker, with calloused hands and eyes shaped by millions of lonely miles, tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The deep growl of the diesel engine and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers were his only companions on this forgotten back road, one abandoned by both God and the county maintenance crews. Roger preferred driving at night. Darkness hid the endless, monotonous landscapes and gave him space to be alone with his thoughts. Even when those thoughts were heavier than the road ahead, he was hauling a load of lumber north through the Midwest, hoping to beat the sunrise. But the downpour forced him to slow, and truthfully, he wasn't in any hurry. Since his wife passed away 5 years earlier, home no longer meant a house. Home was this cab, metal and leather, stale coffee, old tobacco, and silence. Then, without warning, the truck's powerful xenon headlights cut through the rain and revealed something that made Roger's heart skip. About 200 yards ahead, on the narrow, muddy shoulder, were silhouettes. Not an animal, not a broken-down car. People, 4 figures walking single file, soaked to the bone, fighting against a wind that looked ready to shove them into the darkness beside the road. Roger's jaw tightened. Every instinct built from decades behind the wheel screamed the same warning. Don't stop. It's a trap. He'd heard the stories. Lonely highways, fake emergencies, ambushes meant to steal cargo or worse. His foot stayed heavy on the accelerator. The world was full of suffering, and he wasn't a hero, just a tired man doing his job. He was ready to pass them by, but as the truck drew closer, the headlights caught one small detail that shattered his resolve. The smallest figure, a boy no older than 7, turned toward the sound of the engine. He didn't wave, he didn't beg, he simply stared into the light with pure terror, clutching tightly to the leg of the man walking ahead of him. Roger saw that pale face and those wide eyes for less than a second. It was enough. A jolt shot through his spine. He cursed out loud, slammed his palm against the steering wheel, and hit the air brakes. The sharp hiss and the scream of tires on wet asphalt cut through the storm. The truck slowed, grinding to a halt about 50 yards ahead of the family. Roger exhaled deeply. He had either just made the worst mistake of his life, or the best decision of the night. He rolled the passenger window down, only a few inches, keeping the engine running, and his hand close to the gear stick. Through the side mirror, he watched the man from the group break into a run toward the cab, leaving the woman and children behind. When the man reached the window, Roger saw desperation etched into every line of his face. He was young, maybe 32, but anguish had aged him far beyond his years. Rain streamed down his cheeks, mixing with tears. "Sir, please," the man shouted, his voice nearly swallowed by the storm. "I don't want money. I don't want anything. My kids can't walk anymore. My little girl has a fever. Please, just take us to the next town. Somewhere with a roof, I'm begging you." There was no threat in his voice, only the broken plea of a father who believed he had failed his family. Roger sighed. A long, heavy sound that came from deep in his chest and unlocked the passenger door. "Jet in quickly," he ordered. The man waved frantically. The woman hurried forward with the 2 children, struggling up into the tall cab. They were weak, soaked, slipping in mud. When they finally settled into the seats and floor space behind Roger, the cab filled with the smell of wet clothes, exhaustion, and fear. The woman, Adele, clutched the little girl in her arms, wrapping her in a shawl that was just as drenched as everything else. The man, Bradley, sat stiffly, shaking uncontrollably, not from the cold, but from the shock of relief. Roger turned the heater all the way up and eased the truck back onto the road. The cab fell silent, broken only by the hum of warm air and the soft chattering teeth of the little boy Timmy. Roger kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel their stares, hopeful, cautious, grateful. Before we continue this journey, one that's about to uncover painful truths, I want to ask you something important. In a world where indifference is common, would you have stopped on a dark highway, risking your own safety? Comment below where you're watching from, and tell us honestly, would your heart have let you drive past? Roger knew he'd broken his golden rule, never pick up strangers. But as he glanced at Adele gently pressing her wet sleeve to her daughter's burning forehead, he knew the rules didn't matter tonight. Their quiet dignity reminded him of suffering that never makes headlines, pain endured in silence. "Here," Roger grunted, pointing to a steel thermos and a paper bag on the dashboard. "Hot coffee, some sandwiches I didn't eat. Have them." Bradley stared at the food as if it were treasure, but he didn't reach for it himself. With trembling hands, Bradley split the sandwich in half, carefully giving the larger portion to his wife and children. Then he poured a small amount of coffee into the thermos lid and offered it to Adele. Roger caught the gesture in the reflection of the windshield. That single act, putting his family first while his own hunger gnawed at him, earned Bradley instant respect. Roger had spent decades surrounded by selfishness at truck stops and loading docks. But here sat a man who seemed to have lost everything except his values. "Where were you walking to on a night like this?" Roger finally asked, breaking the silence. Bradley swallowed the small bite of bread he'd allowed himself and cleared his throat. "Apple Valley, sir." Roger raised an eyebrow. "That's 150 miles from here. At this pace you'd have frozen, or worse, before sunrise." Bradley lowered his gaze. "I know, but we were evicted this morning. The landlord sold the trailer park for development. No car, no money for a bus." He hesitated before adding, "A cousin said there's work in Apple Valley seasonal harvest jobs. Walking was our only option." The story hit Roger harder than he expected. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was the quiet, bureaucratic cruelty of poverty. People erased by paperwork and progress. Adele spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "We told the kids it was an adventure, that we were seeing who could walk the longest in the rain." She gently brushed wet hair from her daughter Sophie's forehead. The child was already drifting to sleep, soothed by the warmth of the cab. "But kids know," Adele added quietly. "They always know when their parents are scared." Roger tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Memories surfaced, his own son, whom he hadn't spoken to in 10 years after a bitter argument fueled by pride and money. He remembered how he'd failed his family emotionally, even when he'd provided for them materially. The family beside him felt like a mirror. They had nothing, yet they had each other. Roger had a 6-figure truck, a solid bank account, and no one. The rain eased into a steady drizzle. Roger knew the road well. Apple Valley was close, but dropping a soaked family at the edge of town in the middle of the night wouldn't fix anything. An idea formed, dangerous, uncomfortable. He glanced at the worn canvas bag. Bradley clutched tightly. Everything they owned. "What do you know how to do, Bradley?" Roger asked, eyes fixed on the dark highway. "Besides walking in the rain and watching over other people's property, what can you do with those hands?" Bradley looked up surprised. "I'm a mechanic, sir. Farm equipment mostly, and carpentry. My father was a cabinet maker." Roger nodded slowly, storing the information like a puzzle piece he wasn't sure he wanted to place yet. The miles rolled on. The cab no longer felt like just shelter from the storm. It had become a moving confessional. An hour later, neon lights appeared ahead. The Last Mile Diner. Roger knew it well. Greasy food, strong coffee, hot showers. "We're stopping," Roger said. Bradley stiffened. "Sir, we don't have money. We'll stay in the truck. Watch your things." The humility in his voice cut deep. Roger parked between 2 semis and shut off the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming. "Nobody waits in my truck like a guard dog," he growled. "If I eat, my passengers eat. That's a rule of the road, and those kids need a bathroom and warm water. Don't argue." They climbed down. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cold and clean. Inside the diner, every head turned. Veteran trucker Roger, followed by a family that looked like they'd walked through a war zone. Roger held his head high, daring anyone to say a word. He slid into a corner booth and motioned for them to sit. Adele tried to clean Sophie's face with her sleeve, embarrassed by the mud. The waitress, Lou, who had known Roger for years, approached with her notepad. She raised an eyebrow, but asked no questions. "The usual?" she asked. "Yeah, Lou, and for them, daily special 4 plates. Soup, meat, potatoes, plenty of bread, and hot milk for the kids." Bradley tried to protest again, whispering that it was too much. Roger raised a calloused hand. "Bradley, pride is a luxury poor folks can't afford when kids are involved. Swallow it, let them eat. Tomorrow you can worry about paying it back." Bradley lowered his head, whispering a thank you that sounded more like a prayer. When the food arrived, the moment was heartbreaking and beautiful. Timmy and Sophie stared at the steaming plates, but didn't touch them until their father nodded. That discipline, even in desperation, impressed Roger deeply. They ate hungrily, but politely, wiping plates clean with bread. Roger barely touched his coffee. Watching color return to the children's cheeks fed him more than food ever could. He realized it had been years since he'd shared a meal. His loneliness, what he'd called independence, now felt like a cold prison compared to the warmth of this broken but united family. "You said you're a carpenter," Roger said as Lou cleared the table. "Yes, sir. Furniture, repairs, anything on the farm. I fixed barns, fences, everything. But the new owner said my work was old-fashioned." Roger chuckled dryly. "Old-fashioned. These days everything's plastic and shortcuts. Real wood scares people who want things fast." He chewed on a toothpick thoughtfully. And mechanics. Bradley straightened. Keeping old machines alive without proper parts teaches you to listen. I can hear what an engine needs before opening it. Friends of real kindness stories. Bradley's story is the story of millions skilled hands pushed aside by greed and modern convenience. But real talent never disappears. It waits. And the right opportunity is closer than you think. Has anyone ever given you a chance when no one else believed in you? Or have you been the one who offered that helping hand? If you believe destiny sometimes disguises itself as coincidence, comment the word opportunity below and tell us which state you're watching from as we continue this journey. Roger paid the bill, left a generous tip, and motioned for the family to follow him back to the truck. But before climbing into the cab, he stopped suddenly and turned to Bradley. Pop the hood. Bradley blinked, confused, but did as he was told. Under the harsh parking lot lights, the massive diesel engine sat exposed, a beast of heat, metal, and oil. I've been hearing a squeal in the alternator belt for about 500 miles, Roger said casually. I pitched. Only when I shift into fourth company mechanics say I'm imagining it. Roger already knew the problem. A worn bearing, hard to spot, easy to miss. This wasn't curiosity, it was a test. Bradley didn't ask for tools. He stepped forward without hesitation, placing his hands on the belts, checking tension, listening closely. Adele and the children watched from the sidewalk, holding their breath. Instinctively, they understood that something important was happening, that their future might hinge on this moment. After 2 minutes, Bradley pointed to a small pulley near the bottom. It's not the belt, he said confidently. It's the tensioner pulley. It's misaligned, just a few millimeters. At certain RPMs, the belt rubs the metal edge. If it's not fixed soon, it'll snap and leave you stranded. Roger felt a quiet thrill run through him. 3 certified mechanics had missed it. This man, hungry, exhausted, standing in the rain, had found it in minutes. Close the hood, Roger said, hiding a smile beneath his gray mustache. You're right. Bradley wiped grease onto his worn pants, relief flooding his face. I could try to adjust it, sir, with a wrench. No time, Roger interrupted. I've got a deadline. But you passed the test. Bradley didn't ask what test. He didn't need to. Back in the cab, the atmosphere had changed. They weren't charity cases anymore. Bradley had earned his place. Respect, real respect, was beginning to take root. The truck rolled back onto the highway, 50 miles to Apple Valley. Roger watched the green road signs pass, locked in a battle with himself. His logic said, drop them off, give them some cash, don't complicate your life. But his heart, an organ he thought had died with his wife, was shouting something else. He glanced at Timmy and Sophie asleep in the bunk, curled together peacefully. He looked at Bradley's hands, resting nervously on his knees. When the sign for exit 45 Fay Apple Valley appeared, Roger didn't slow down. He drove right past it. Bradley noticed instantly. Panic surged through him. He leaned forward, gripping the back of Roger's seat. Sir, you passed the exit. That was our town. Adele clutched the children, fear flashing across her face. Roger didn't turn the wheel. His voice remained steady. I didn't miss it. Then why didn't you stop? Bradley asked, torn between gratitude and terror. Roger exhaled, a deep, weighted breath. If I dropped you there at this hour, in the cold, with no money, you wouldn't last till dawn. He said, Apple Valley chews people up. I've hauled freight there. Foremen exploit workers. Housing's a joke. It would trap you in the same cycle forever. He glanced at Bradley through the rearview mirror. You have the hands of a craftsman, the instincts of a mechanic. Taking your family there would bury that. Bradley's voice trembled. Then where are you taking us? To my place, Roger said. 2 hours north, Pine Ridge, he continued. I've got a workshop, closed for years. I need someone who knows the difference between a pulley and a belt. This isn't charity. It's a job, a roof, a paycheck. In exchange, you help bring that shop back to life. The cab fell silent. Adele and Bradley exchanged a look of disbelief. Life had taught them that offers this good usually came with traps. Adele spoke, protective and firm. What do you get out of this, Mr. Roger? Nobody gives something for nothing. Roger smiled sadly. I get peace of mind, he said. I get company, and I get a house that doesn't echo with silence anymore. If you don't like it, I'll pay for bus tickets anywhere you want. Just give me 1 week. Bradley looked at his children, Timmy snoring softly, Sophie with chocolate still on her lips. He thought about mud camps and uncertainty. Then he looked at Roger, the man who had given them warmth without asking for anything. We'll take the trial week, Bradley said. But I work for what we earn. If I don't deserve the pay, we leave. Roger nodded. Deal, get some sleep. The mountain roads are rough. We'll be there by dawn. The truck surged forward, almost as if approving the pact. As the road climbed into the mountains, The rain stopped. The sky slowly cleared, painted in violet and gold. Roger thought about his empty house and the old carpentry shop he hadn't opened in years. Maybe he was crazy, but remembering the spark in Bradley's eyes when he diagnosed the engine, Roger felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. Hope. It was the thrill of possibility, of purpose, of a future Roger hadn't allowed himself to imagine in years. Maybe, just maybe, this family hadn't crossed his path for him to save them, but for them to save him. Let's pause here for a moment. Tales of kindness community. Roger's choice is a dangerous one. Opening your home to strangers requires a level of faith in humanity that feels rare today. What holds us back from trusting others' fear or experience? If you were in Roger's place, would you have taken the family home or left them somewhere safe with a bit of cash? Comment the word trust if you believe the world needs more leaps of faith like this one. As dawn finally broke, the Kenworth turned onto a dirt road, sending up clouds of golden dust. They arrived at a sprawling property surrounded by tall pines and ancient oak trees. At its center stood a large ranch-style house with wooden siding and a shingle roof. It was impressive, yet clearly neglected, paint peeled from the walls. The garden had become a jungle of weeds. One second, floor window was boarded shut. Off to the side stood a massive wood and metal shed. A workshop and garage rolled into one. "Welcome to the Haven," Roger said quietly, parking near the shed. Bradley and Adele stepped down from the truck, stretching stiff legs and staring in awe. Despite the neglect, the place had strong bones, solid, honest craftsmanship. The air felt different here, peaceful. The children ran toward an old tire swing hanging from an oak tree, laughing for the first time in days, pretending to be cowboys in the Wild West. Roger led everyone inside. As he opened the heavy oak door, the smell of stale air and dust rushed out. Furniture lay hidden under white sheets, like ghosts frozen in time. He pulled back the curtains, letting morning light pour in as dust motes danced in the air. Adele noticed everything. A dried coffee cup on the table. A calendar stopped 5 years ago. Dead plants in forgotten pots. She understood instantly. This house wasn't just dirty. It was grieving. "You can use the guest rooms downstairs," Roger said. "Hot water, clean beds, just needs airing out." "I've got to check the truck, Bradley. Come with me." They walked to the shed. When Roger flung open the double doors, Bradley gasped. Despite cobwebs and stacked boxes, it was paradise. A hardwood workbench, vintage woodworking tools. Lining the walls, a lathe, saws, chisels, rusted, neglected, but clearly top tier. In the back, a mechanic's pit with heavy equipment. "My father was a carpenter," Roger said. "I'm a mechanic. This place used to be the heart of the town. Now it's a graveyard. Think you can bring it back?" Bradley stepped forward, brushing dust from the workbench with reverence. He lifted a rusted chisel, testing its balance. His eyes lit up, not with desperation, but purpose. "With some oil, sandpaper, and love," he said, voice steady, "this shop could produce the best furniture in the region, and I can maintain your truck here, save you thousands." Roger watched as Bradley straightened, transforming before his eyes. He was no longer a man begging for shelter. He was a master craftsman standing on sacred ground. The moment shattered. A modern pickup truck tore down the dirt road and screeched to a stop. A man jumped out, slamming the door. Stephen, Roger's only son at 38. Stephen wore expensive designer clothes that looked ridiculous in the dust. His face twisted with arrogance and disgust as he stormed into the shed. "What the hell is going on here, Dad?" he shouted. Then his eyes landed on Bradley. "And who is this? You picking up bums off the highway now to steal what little you have left?" Bradley instinctively stepped back, shame burning his face. But Roger moved first, stepping between his son and Bradley, his voice low and dangerous. "Watch your mouth, Stephen." Stephen hesitated, surprised by the fire in his father's eyes. "This is Bradley," Roger continued. "The new shop foreman. He's here because I invited him. And this is my house. Something you seem to forget while spending my money in the city." Stephen laughed cruelly. "Shop foreman, Dad. This place is a ruin. You haven't touched it in 10 years. You're losing it, and these people are taking advantage of you." He circled Bradley like a predator. "Listen, pal. I don't know what story you sold the old man, but you're not getting a cent. This property is being sold. Take your family and leave before I call the cops." Bradley turned to Roger, voice shaking. "Maybe we should go. We don't want to cause problems." Roger grabbed his arm firmly. "You're not going anywhere." Then he faced his son. "Sale? I haven't signed anything. This house isn't for sale. Your mother's memories are here. You grew up here." The mention of his mother hardened Stephen's expression. "She's gone, Dad, and you're never home. A developer offered me a fortune for this land, condos. Real money. I won't let your nostalgia, or your dementia, Ruin it, the truth surfaced greed. Stephen saw the home not as a legacy, but as cash, and Bradley's family threatened his plan to declare Roger unfit and seize control. If you don't kick them out today, Stephen hissed, I'll file for incapacitation. I'll tell the court you've lost your mind, and with your isolation, they'll believe me. The threat froze the room. Stephen glanced at Adele and the children with open contempt. Great, the whole tribe. What is this? A charity shelter? I bet they're planning squatters' rights already. Parasites. That was enough. Adele handed Sophie to Timmy and stepped forward. Tears burned her eyes, but her voice was unshaken. Here is the fully rephrased, cinematic, and high-retention version of Part 5 of your script. The meaning, emotional intensity, and moral payoff are preserved, while the language, pacing, and transitions are sharpened to keep viewers hooked through the climax. Sir, we are not parasites, Adele said firmly. We are workers. Your father offered us shelter in exchange for restoring the place you abandoned and left to decay. Maybe if you visited him more often, he wouldn't have had to find family on the side of the road. Her words struck Stephen exactly where it hurt. His pride, and the guilt he worked so hard to bury. Roger looked at Adele with quiet admiration, then turned to his son with a disappointment deeper than anger. You heard her, Stephen, Roger said coldly. Get out, now. He reached for a heavy wrench resting on a shelf, not to threaten, but to remind everyone whose ground this was. This is my property. My name is on the deed. My sweat paid for every brick, and as long as I'm breathing, I decide who stays and who leaves. Bradley stays, Adele stays. You go. Roger stepped closer, his voice unwavering. And if you try that dirty trick in court, I'll spend every last dollar I have on lawyers just to disinherit you. Don't test me. You know I'm stubborn as a mule. The old trucker's strength, the same resolve that had carried him through endless highways and sleepless nights, rose in full force. Stephen saw it, and for the first time, he realized his father wasn't weak. He backed toward his truck, but not without one final poisonous threat. This isn't over, Dad. Enjoy your new friends while you can. Once the judge sees you've got homeless people living here with kids, child services and the cops will swarm this place. You'll regret this. He jumped into his truck, tore down the dirt road in a cloud of dust, and vanished. The silence he left behind was thick and heavy. Bradley collapsed onto a bench, burying his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, Roger. We brought this war to your door. We should leave. Tonight. Roger walked over, placed a firm hand on Bradley's shoulder, and squeezed. No, he said quietly. You didn't bring this war. It was already here, just silent and cold. All you did was bring it into the open. He stared down the road where his son had disappeared. Stephen has always chased easy money. He never understood the value of building something with your own hands. If you leave now, he wins. And I'm left alone waiting to die in some nursing home. Roger turned back to them, his voice softening but no less firm. I need you to stay, not just for the workshop, but to prove to the court, the world, and my son that this place is alive. We're going to make this shop shine so bright, no one can claim I've lost my mind. It was a plea disguised as an order, a man asking them to fight beside him for his life. Bradley looked at Adele. She nodded, calm, resolute, with the quiet courage of a mother who knows it's time to stand her ground. Then let's get to work, boss, Bradley said, grabbing a rag and wiping down the bench. We'll fix this place so well your son will be ashamed to step inside. Over the next week, the haven was transformed. From sunrise to sunset, Bradley and Adele worked tirelessly, scrubbing, repairing, painting, oiling. The sound of saws and hammers echoed through the valley again. The children helped too, pulling weeds and planting a small garden with tomatoes and corn, already dreaming of their first backyard barbecue. For the first time in years, Roger slept in a real bed. He ate home, cooked meals, like Adele's apple pie, baked from scratch. But Stephen's shadow still loomed. One morning, just as they finished restoring the front door, a police cruiser and a city official's car rolled into the driveway, pulling in beside Stephen's truck. Two social workers stepped out, folders in hand, followed by a bored-looking officer. Stephen stood waiting. A smug smile stretched across his face. There they are, he shouted, pointing at Bradley and the children playing on the porch. Just like I said, illegal squatters, kids at risk, and a senile old man who can't take care of himself. Roger stepped outside calmly, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. Good morning, officer, he said evenly. To what do we owe this visit, especially without a warrant? The social worker adjusted her glasses. Mr. Roger, we've received a serious report regarding the living conditions here, and your mental state. Well then, Roger replied, opening the door wide. Come see for yourselves. Stephen expected chaos. Filth-proof instead. His jaw dropped. The house smelled of beeswax, fresh bread, and flowers. Floors gleamed, furniture was restored. The kitchen was fully stocked. Adele had turned a neglected shell into a warm, dignified home, an American flag neatly displayed on the mantel. The social worker inspected the rooms, saw the children clean, well-dressed, quietly doing homework at the dining table. She turned to Stephen, irritation clear in her voice. "Where exactly is the danger, Mr. Stephen? This home is not only functional, it's better maintained than many I visit." Stephen's plan was collapsing before his eyes. Desperate, he switched tactics. "It's all an act," Stephen snapped desperately. "My father's not right in the head. He picked these people up off the street. They're manipulating him. I wouldn't be surprised if they're drugging him." Roger didn't raise his voice. Instead, he walked calmly to an antique desk and pulled out a worn leather folder. "Son," he said quietly, with a cold certainty that froze the room, "you've always underestimated me. And today, you've underestimated yourself too." He opened the folder and laid the documents on the table. "I knew you'd come with this story. That's why I went into town yesterday. Inside this folder is a full mental health evaluation, signed by the chief psychiatrist at the regional hospital. I am of sound mind." Stephen's confidence wavered. "And this," Roger continued, lifting another paper, "is a notarized affidavit naming Bradley as my property manager and live-in employee, under a legal contract." Roger handed the folder to the police officer. "These people are my employees and my guests. You, Stephen, are the only intruder here." The officer skimmed the documents, then nodded. "Everything checks out, Mr. Stephen. Filing false reports with social services is a serious offense. I suggest you leave immediately, before I escort you to the station for harassment and misuse of public resources." The humiliation hit Stephen like a hammer, in front of the very people he had called parasites. His own father had defeated him using the law Stephen tried to weaponize. Stephen glared at Roger, not just with anger now, but fear. "You'll regret this, Dad," he spat. "When they steal everything you own, don't come crawling back to me." Roger looked at him, not with rage, but sadness. "I won't come," he said softly, "because I've already found my family. They may not share my blood, but they share my honor." Stephen stormed out, slammed his truck door, and tore down the road in a cloud of dust, disappearing from Roger's life forever. When the officers left, apologizing quietly, a silence of pure relief filled the house. Adele collapsed into a chair, finally breaking down after days of fear. Bradley wrapped Roger in an awkward but heartfelt hug. "I thought you'd choose yourself and kick us out," Bradley admitted. "I wouldn't have blamed you." Roger patted his back. "You fixed my truck's engine," he said gently. "And the engine of my life. I'm not losing that." With Stephen gone, the Haven began to thrive. What started as a small repair shop became the Haven Workshop, part carpentry studio, part mechanic's garage. Truckers stopped for engine repairs and left with handcrafted furniture, custom shelves, or wooden keepsakes. Bradley's talent with wood turned out to be extraordinary. Orders stacked up, waiting lists formed. Roger sold his long-haul truck and bought a delivery van. His routes grew shorter, but his days fuller. He taught Timmy how to carve wood. He showed Sophie how to tend the garden. He became the grandfather he never got to be. 5 years passed. The Haven wasn't abandoned anymore. It was the heart of the community. Adele managed the books with quiet brilliance. Bradley trained apprentices, and Roger aged. But he didn't fade. Every wrinkle on his face came from laughter, not loneliness. One rainy afternoon, just like the night they met, Roger sat on the porch with Bradley. "I almost didn't stop that night," Roger admitted, watching the rain fall. "I almost drove past you," Bradley smiled softly. "But you didn't. That's what mattered." Roger passed away peacefully one winter night, surrounded by Bradley, Adele, Timmy, and Sophie. No fear, no loneliness. His will was simple. The house, the workshop, everything, left to Bradley and Adele. A scholarship fund for Timmy and Sophie. And to Stephen, just one thing, an old, empty toolbox. Inside was a note, so you can learn to build your own life, instead of trying to steal it from others. It was Roger's final lesson, today. The story of Roger and the family he met in the rain is local legend. It reminds us that family isn't defined by DNA, but by loyalty, dignity, and shared care. Roger saved Bradley from poverty. Bradley saved Roger from loneliness. They rescued each other. And it teaches us something we often forget. Sometimes the greatest detours, the moments when we choose to stop instead of speeding past, are the ones that lead us home. If this story touched your heart, type loyalty in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists. Subscribe for more stories that feed the soul. And remember, When you see someone walking in the rain, don't speed up, they might be carrying the miracle you've been waiting for.